Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Timmy. Turn around, Timmy, we can't see you. This is a momentous time. This is the time to stand up and be counted, even if we stop the traffic and trams, as we've done this morning. Never before have we been closer to ending one of the cruelest trades in Australia's history. Never before have we seen so much activity to clean up importing countries for Australian animals. The live export industry is on notice, and it's in large part thanks to each and every one of you who've supported the RSPCA and Animals Australia over the last 35 years in our efforts to hold this industry to account. We are close, but we're not there yet. The German philosopher Albert Schweitzer once reminded us to think occasionally of the suffering of which you spare yourself the sight. Without a doubt, the only reason the live export trade has continued for 3 decades is because the suffering of millions of animals has been out of sight of the Australian community. If the history of this trade and funding for animal welfare related activities were to be put on a chart, you would see that the peak times of industry and government interest in animal welfare have always come on the back of a television news story. The greatest fear of live exporters has always been that caring Australians would see the cruelty that the animals are subjected to. Well, Australians saw what was happening to our cattle in Indonesia 2 months ago and have resoundingly cried, "Enough is enough." Over the past 30 years, Australia's live export industry has sent over 160 million animals to countries where laws do not protect them from cruelty. 2.5 million animals died on that boat voyage. I wonder if the farmers who produce those animals understand the reality of what happens to their stock. Sheep die on every ship that leaves Australia. That is a fact. There are inherent risks in long-distance transport that can never be overcome. Few would forget the horror of the Cormo Express, where thousands of Australian sheep perished at sea. But that disaster in 2003 was just one in a long line of incidents that have plagued this trade since it began. From fires on ships to heat stress and dehydration, to illness and injury, to plain mismanagement and incompetence, animals have suffered as part of this trade. The industry tries to use statistics to hide the fact that we're talking about individual animals dying, each and every one of them capable of suffering, fear, pain and distress. Imagine a football field filled with sheep. Last year 30,000 sheep died on ships. If they were standing side by side like Timmy is here, that is enough sheep to blanket 4 football fields. These animals are just regarded as collateral damage. The sad reality is that those who die on the ships are the lucky ones. Evidence collected throughout the Middle East and Southeast Asia has consistently exposed the cruel treatment and slaughter of Australian exported animals. It's little wonder that a federal parliamentary committee years ago concluded that if the future of live export trade was to be determined on animal welfare grounds alone, then it should end, and end immediately. That was perhaps the first time in this trade's bleak history that it was officially suggested that animal welfare should be put ahead of profit. You can argue for live export on profits, but you cannot argue on animal welfare, though many try. This is why we say to our politicians that you cannot oppose animal cruelty and in the next breath support live animal exports. Indonesia was the turning point in the live export debate. Of all the countries where animal welfare should have been okay, because of the level of Australian industry involvement, it was Indonesia. Of all the importing countries, we were least concerned about, and naively so, because of the relatively short sea journey. It was Indonesia. Of all the countries that industry groups should have ensured animals were properly protected, if only because of the number of producers in northern Australia who solely rely on that market, it was Indonesia. What was uncovered in that country were the worst abuses ever documented against Australian exported animals. And what made it worse was that it was all happening under the nose of Meat and Livestock Australia and the industry bodies that have been caught out before, when in 2006 they admitted to supplying 1 million cattle to Cairo's main abattoir, where they knew they were being brutalised, and I've seen it for myself. I say Indonesia was a turning point for a number of reasons. Firstly, the level of industry culpability in not only supplying animals to cruelty, but in facilitating those cruel deaths, confirmed irrefutably that this is an industry that can never be trusted